welcome to vlog number 125. This is the vlog where I talk about Quarterly Stories, which is my graphic novel that I hand write, hand letter, and hand ink, and then hand to you. Hopefully someday in print, but until that day it's available serialized online at quarterlystories.com. It's a very personal story to me about faith and mental illness, and this is the vlog where I document the progress and the process of creating that graphic novel on top of being a full-time art director, full-time father, and a full-time husband. So, I'm on my way to work. Progress on the comics coming along good. I've already basically done the panel borders and the lettering for the next page of Quarterly Stories, as well as penciled the first panel. So tonight, my goal is to hopefully, after I get home, to pencil panel 2. And also, hopefully, as a side goal, I also would like to retain my habit of doing, my daily exercise. So that all kind of feeds into the comic, because to me, if I don't have the energy or the stamina to basically, stick with a comic page when I get home, if I just come home exhausted and go to sleep, or come home exhausted and just play with the kid and then go to sleep, that's just not necessarily going to really equate to achieving my goal of getting this comic done. So exercise has started to become pretty much like a requirement. Like I'm hoping to do that on a daily basis. I also try to do at least one panel a day, and that's broken up, not like an entire panel, but to at least pencil one panel or ink one panel and hit that on a daily basis. And I've been doing that for the past year or two, and it's had some pretty good successes so far. I'm at about the 2/3 point of finishing the first book for Quarterly Stories, which I'm pretty excited about. But in order to get that thing done, in order to get this idea of something that I really want to achieve that has much more of a long-term payoff than a short-term payoff, I have to stay dedicated to it, and we'll see how that goes. So that's the status on the comic so far and what I'm thinking about as I'm heading to work. Another thing that I'm also trying to keep in mind is that I really want to start doing t-shirt designs, and I did come up with a rough concept for an idea for the next shirt design. I think I'm going to focus on hopefully typographic designs, and so this will be interesting just as a start, and then I'm hoping to put those designs probably as prints on Society 6, and then maybe actually utilize my threadless art store to put them as being available for t-shirts. So that's all what's going on the back burner. So tonight, if I can also hopefully start the roughs for that t-shirt, that would be cool. But the main goal and what I'm really going to try to achieve is at least penciling the second panel. I've also been reading quite a bit. So I'm reading Monograph by Chris Ware, which is a pretty heavy read. It's a pretty thick book, and anytime I read Chris Ware, it's like it usually takes me a while to get through, because it's something I like to spend a lot of time and focus a lot of attention on, because his work is brilliant and the writing's really good. So I don't really want to like casually approach it or do a casual read. So there's that. I've also just pretty much breezed through reading Seconds by Bryan Lee O'Malley, which is a great book. It's really entertaining. It's more of a light read, obviously, than like a Ware book. But the thing is, I'm a big fan of Bryan Lee O'Malley. I actually first discovered him years ago when I was lent the book Lost at Sea, which is about this story about like two sisters kind of growing apart, and it was just this really poetically done book, and it had this really unique style where it's kind of almost like manga or anime influenced, but there's something very like Bryan Lee O'Malley about the way that the style is created and approached. and the storytelling is incredibly strong, and the panel choices and stuff are really strong as well. And then, of course, most of you guys are probably familiar with Bryan Lee O'Malley because he wrote Scott Pilgrim, which, you know, became a movie and got licensed, and it's an excellent movie. It's really funny, and it's a great little series of graphic novels that is like highly entertaining, and for comics, you know, can, I think, be pretty inspiring. So anyhow, Seconds is pretty good. My impression was that it was a pretty entertaining read. I mean, the gist of it is a story about a person who, she's a cook, and she basically has this really interesting cast of characters around her, which is very common in Bryan Lee O'Malley books, where they're usually about multiple characters. Like they're kind of group stories that kind of focus around one person in the group, but there's a lot of like really entertaining, interesting characters. But the gist is this girl who's a chef at a restaurant stumbles upon these kind of magic mushrooms that, you know, basically she can write on a pad of paper, sort of like Death Note style pad of paper. She can write mistakes she's made that she wants to undo, and then take this mushroom, and suddenly it will rewrite the past to where that mistake didn't happen. And so it basically, you know, goes through this story of what happens when a person can kind of edit their own life and edit out some of the mistakes. And it's a pretty entertaining story. It's I felt like the ending was a little rushed. The ending felt like, you know, it was kind of squeezed into the last like 3 or 4 pages. However, the story itself was just like really entertaining and really interesting. And there were some things he did with paneling that really got me thinking. And that's one of the things I like about occasionally reading other books or reading other graphic novels, is you always get ideas for your own work. For me, one of the things I constantly get from Bryan Lee O'Malley's work is how much can be done with so little. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just that he is pretty brilliant at choosing to depict exactly what needs to be shown for the story to advance forward. And his style is very simplistic, but he can carry a lot of weight with a very simple style. And so that's just something to, you know, for me to carry forward and hopefully apply whenever I have a style shift happen as well. Because for those of you who are familiar with quarterly stories, like the whole second chapter of quarterly stories is done in a completely different style, and I will probably be returning to that once this little arc is wrapped up. I mean, the idea behind it has always been to kind of work in various styles, and obviously the time frame that I'm discussing in the comic now, the style fits more with the style of chapter 1. But anyhow, so that's just that's something I'm reading and kind of thinking about on my way to work. As you can tell, I also still have a pretty like screwed up throat, which is really weird because it's like this sickness thing has been like dragging and sticking around for, now it feels like almost like a month at this point. So I'm hoping that clears up. But that's where I'm at. I'm heading to work, and I'm gonna head home, you know, after work, and I'll follow up with you guys if I have any thoughts on art or comics or anything like that on the way. And in the meantime, hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be able to stick to that daily habit of getting comics done and getting closer to achieving the goal of finishing this book. Alright, so I'm heading home. It's pouring rain outside, and that's actually kind of refreshing. I mean, it's just kind of nice to have, you know, it's nice to have some rain, but it is a little intimidating when it comes to driving. So anyhow, just really excited about getting home and working on some comics. Having to kind of staff up. at work, and so that's been a lot of stress. I mean, like, the nice thing about staffing and adding staff is that it can be really cool for the workplace and the dynamic there, to bring in, you know, like a new, fresh perspective. It's also exciting to be able to train somebody, but staffing and interviewing is always really one of the hardest processes of management. But so that's happening. So I'm kind of tired from that. And then I'm just looking forward to getting art done and hopefully getting my, you know, staying with the positive habits that I've built for the last few years, which can also be really trying. Like, for me, one of the biggest struggles with working on a big project like I'm working on is just trying to stay motivated and hopeful about it. Because when you're working on something like a book that you really want people to read, it can be discouraging, and it can be really hard to kind of stay motivated to keep doing it, because you can kind of feel like you're just putting drops in an ocean and feel like it's insignificant, which is where I take a lot of strength in my own belief system, because I firmly believe that those little drops in the ocean actually count, that making good work, you know, to make an impact matters. And that's a nice thing to be able to rest on whenever I start feeling doubt about the ability to kind of like make any sort of impact or wave with what I'm doing. I also really believe in this story. Like, I think that I know it's a heavy story, and it's kind of it can be a little discouraging as a story, but I guarantee you there is hope, and there is hope in the story. So bear with it, because the first book may not actually end on a hopeful note, but you know, as the arc of this story kind of connects and ties and keeps going, it should be actually a fairly hopeful story. So that's what I'm thinking about. Right now I'm going to actually stop off and get food, which is something I'm trying not to have to buy a lot out, but it's rather late, and I'm starting to feel a little woozy, so I need to get some kind of thing in my system so that I don't you know, have an accident on the way home. So yeah, so that's what I'm up to. How are you guys doing out there on your projects? I know like 80 to 90% of the subscribers on this channel are also making art, and I'm kind of curious, like, what do you guys do to kind of stay motivated and get through your projects? How do you fight self-doubt when your brain starts kind of going to those darker places of like, well, will it even count? Will anybody buy my book? Will anyone care? For me, I find a lot of encouragement in the fact that I think that the effort and the process matters. I think that it is important, and I think that for those of you out there struggling to make your own art, the struggle is worth it. And it can be discouraging and whatnot, but by going through the struggle, you've become better than 90% of the people out there. Let me order real quick. Order at McDonald's, it's crazy.
Hello, how can I help you?
Hi, yeah, I'd like to get a number 1.
Medium or large?
Let's do medium.
And what kind of drink for you?
A Coke.
I'm sorry?
A Coke.
A Coke. Anything else for you?
Do you guys have kids meal toys?
Yes, we do.
Okay, can I get one for a boy?
Just a toy?
Yeah.
And doesn't matter which one?
What do you have?
I can show you at the window before you purchase.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
That'll do it.
That's $10.64.
Okay.
So I penciled this panel yesterday and this panel today. So that's 2 panels penciled. Got my comicking done for the night, and now it's off to go to sleep.
All right, so I'm heading home. I'm feeling pretty good, pretty positive about tonight. Now it's Tuesday night, and usually on nights like today or tonight, I will work on rock and roll with my buddy. We do that every Tuesday, but the last few Tuesdays just haven't quite worked out because there's been all this sickness going around. And so my friend and his whole family are sick, and so we're gonna have to cancel Rock and Roll Tuesday. But that actually works out because I think I mentioned this on the last recording, but I have a pretty solid idea, at least an idea I'm happy with as a concept to kind of make the next t-shirt design. And this one kind of relates to these vlogs, and I think might be of interest to people who follow me on my vlog. Basically, it's gonna be, I'm gonna do a series of typographic t-shirt designs because I realized when I was doing that logo that I showed in the last video, how much I love playing with typography and what a kind of enjoyable process that is. So, as a template to sort of toy with typography, I'm going to do t-shirts of specific sayings and quotes and just, you know, phrases that I like. And in this case, I'm actually going to make one that ties into something that I talk about a lot on this vlog. And it might be a little too blunt for a lot of people, but at the same time, I think it has a pretty strong message. The idea of it, I actually don't want to say it though. I'll let you guys kind of view it as I work on it, and you can see what the quote says. But I think that most of you guys who are busy making stuff might actually like having a shirt like this. So anyhow, so that's one thing I'd like to work on tonight, is to get a little further on my roughs and my rough layouts for that t-shirt. And then the next thing, the main primary thing that I'd like to do when I get home is really utilize the extra time that I'm going to have tonight to hopefully pencil the next panel of Quarterly Stories. And then, as usual, I would also like to do my workout. So, yeah, that's what's on the dock today. It's interesting. I've been really enjoying reading lately, and so I'm like knee deep in a book called Fire and Fury, which is this really insane expose about the Trump administration that came out that I guess kind of pissed off the president enough to where I think he talked about suing the publisher for libel. And what made me interested in purchasing it is how the publisher responded to it, because the publisher actually immediately responded by saying they would release the book, I think like a week earlier than it was intended to. So instead of caving and withdrawing the release as was demanded by the president, they actually released it earlier, which I just thought was kind of rad. And so I got really interested. It's a bit of a disturbing read so far, and but I'm finding it really also highly interesting and highly disturbing at the same time. But it's something I think most of you who might have any interest in politics or whatever might have an interest in reading. However, you know, if you're not all that into politics, then, you know, it probably isn't a book for you. So that's one book that I'm kind of knee deep in. I'm also slowly working my way through that Chris Ware Monograph book as well. So that's kind of on my reading dock right now. And other than that, I'm just kind of like enjoying the process of creating stuff right now. I feel kind of pumped. I've been feeling fairly encouraged, especially today, that creative endeavors are worthwhile, and that just keeping hitting it, keeping at it, there's really something to be said for that. So anyhow, I'm not quite sure what that something is, but it's definitely something. All right, so I'm gonna head home, hopefully survive the rain. As you can probably see, it's cleared up quite a bit from the last time I vlogged. And yeah, and then I'm gonna hopefully show you guys a little bit of footage of the next panel that I pencil, and might be able to get into showing you a little bit of the roughs for my t-shirt design once that's kind of a little more worked out. And then yeah, that should do it. Okay, so I got a little more progress done on my comics, so I'll show you the panel that I penciled, and then I'll show you the very start of a t-shirt design that I'm drawing, and then I will call it a day. So far this sequence is the character walking, the ground suddenly starts cracking mildly, so they stop like, and then the ground starts cracking, and that's before this panel. And hopefully what I'm hoping with this page is to have it kind of read like in that order, which is going to be really interesting. And over here, I have the very beginning of a t-shirt design, and no spoilers, so I will let you guys know as I get it kind of going a little further. Alright, so overall a pretty successful day. I hope you guys are having a successful week in your own art journeys, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks again to those of you who've commented, liked, or shared this YouTube channel. It means a lot. And if you guys have been watching this and haven't yet, please subscribe by hitting the subscribe button.